Senator Daines.
Secretary Kerry, thank you for being here today. Many of us were outside of D.C. last week. Many of us went home. I spent the week back in Montana. One of the top-of-mind issues for the average Montanan as we're sitting down having cups of coffee is what's going on in the Middle East, certainly in ISIS, this issue of radical Islam. Secretary Kerry, during your presidential campaign in 2004, you used the term Islamic extremism to describe the radical Saudi clerics. And in your '97 book, The New War, you described the Taliban as Islamic fundamentalists. In your opinion, could one of these terms that you've used, and I think correctly used, Islamic extremists, Islamic radicals, Islamic fundamentalists, be used to describe ISIS?
Well, first of all, I'm pleased to have anything I said in 2004 validated in 2015, but not treating any of this lightly. Some, not all. I say, you know, these guys are, there are some of them who have a dream of a caliphate and who are obviously implementing their very warped sense of Islam in a horrendous, grotesque way. But they certainly think they are furthering some kind of thing, and I have called them any number of different things, including, you know, an Islamic extremist, if in fact they're wearing that hat, and that's what they're trying to do, and they're proselytizing on that basis. But not all of them are. You got a lot of thrill seekers, you've got adventurers, you've got thugs, you've got a mix of opportunists, you have an unbelievable array contained within this. And so I think you want to be careful how you sort of tab it as a whole.
Mr. Secretary, as I look around the world, David Cameron's been very, very clear, I think, provided great moral clarity on defining this issue. Tony Blair has been very, very clear on this. In fact, even King Abdullah, who met with the Appropriations Committee. In fact, we met 2 hours after that horrible video was released of that F-16 pilot. He said this is a war inside of Islam. And I think there's a concern we lack this moral clarity that many leaders around the world we're not hearing this from the President. And it's giving great concern.
Well, make no mistake. Look, I think you're working too hard to try to create something that isn't anything here. The President could not be more committed to beating back ISIS, Daesh, whatever you want to call it. I prefer to call it Daesh because then you avoid this notion that there's anything Islamic about it, which there fundamentally isn't. And Daesh is a pejorative in Arab terms. So we all ought to call it that. But the point I'm making is that the President is just trying to be careful not to lend to a whole bunch of other people who take quick swipes at this. And if you go to the social media, you'll see the degree to which people are trying to make it look like America is engaged in some kind of religious war, or that this is an effort to be at war with us. So he's trying to be careful. I think it's appropriate the President is trying to be careful about that. But make no mistake, all of us understand that there are radical Islamic extremists engaged in these endeavors, just as there are others. But when the President speaks, I think it's appropriate for the President to try to, because his voice is so much more magnified than yours, mine, others, and I think it has to be done properly.
I think what we saw, though, concerning, though, was just last week, and of course it created a media firestorm when the State Department spokeswoman Marie Harf made the comments that implied that the way to confront terrorism was through jobs programs, or somehow this is primarily a governance issue. It was her words in terms of root cause. And so is the administration's belief that the root cause of this terrorism is economic versus ideological or religious?
Let me speak to that. It's a good, I'm glad you asked that. Marie spoke globally about the problem of violent extremism in the context of the summit that we were having. And she clearly, as she has almost every day that she speaks, embraced our military effort. We're going to kill as many of these terrorists already declared members of Daesh as we can, and the President's goal is to degrade and destroy ISIS. That's the goal. He has stated it. I have stated it any number of times. But the fact is, if all you do is do that, you're not going to solve this problem. Some Secretary of State is going to be here in the future, some president will be there, and there'll be a different acronym, and you're going to be talking about how you get rid of them. Because there's a big pool of people out there waiting to be seduced into this. Why do you think 3 young girls get on an airplane, leave Britain? Why do you think there are several hundred Americans over there? Why are there thousands of people from Russia, from Germany, from France, from Britain, from various countries who are going to Syria to fight? Well, something is bringing them to that. Now, part of our conference the other day, Dr. Peter Newman, who has done a huge amount of work on this. He's at King's College in London, and he's the director of the International Center for Study of Radicalization. Here's what he said. He said, you got to know who these people are, and you got to know why they're joining. And he said, so we know these people. We know their stories. We know there isn't just one story. There are many of them. Some of them are pious, but others not so much. Many have troubled histories. Some would have had great prospects if they'd stayed in their European home countries. Some were driven by the humanitarian suffering, the Syrian people. Others were seeking thrill and adventure. And of course, many were genuinely committed to and enthusiastic about the totalitarian project of the group that calls itself ISIL. Here's what he concludes. The real way you're going to deal with this, he thought, was the first issue of the fighters' parents. And he said a lot of people have been kept from the battlefield by their parents and families and what they come from. Secondly is the Internet. A lot of the Internet is radicalizing them. And thirdly, he said, if you really want to get serious about reducing the pool of people who are susceptible to the ideas of their violent extremists, you have to begin by recognizing a lot of these people don't even feel a stake in their own society. So this is bigger. That's what Maria was saying.
Yeah.
And it didn't deserve, she never set out to say the solution is give them jobs.
Yeah, Secretary Kerry
talked about a much broader array of things we have to do. And if we can't have a serious conversation about this without politicizing it on cable TV and making it a scoring point for one day, we're in trouble.
Well, I think there's great anxiety and concern back home around, folks back home are seeing this as an ideological threat. And I remind all of us here that the 9/11 attackers came from good families, they were well-to-do, and it was the greatest attack on U.S. soil came from individuals who, most were from very rich, top-class families. And so I guess I hope that we can at least all have an open dialogue here on getting back to the root cause, which I think is more than jobs and governance, but comes back to an ideology, and I think that's a debate we need to have here in this country.
Well, it is, but why does somebody fall prey to that ideology? Why does somebody think going and cutting off somebody's head is a good idea? Why does somebody think, why is somebody not more aware how women are actually going to be treated when they show up? I mean, there's a gap here of knowledge, and there's a, there's a readiness and willingness in some, it's different everywhere, believe me. I've been looking at this now for 30 years, and I'm telling you, it's different everywhere. There's no one-size-fits-all shoe that's going to solve this. It has to be a holistic approach. But the one thing I want to say to you, as sure as, with everything I can summon about imperative, we have to step up and do more, and we have to view it holistically. And we have to understand it's a whole bunch of things. And if we work at it holistically, we're gonna win. If we make the wrong judgments, though, about what's going to make a difference, then we're going to take a lot longer to do what we need to do.
Thanks, Mr. Secretary.